Pricing changes using option 8.1. CoPOS gives you several ways to change pricing information for a set of items. This video will cover how to change pricing information using option 8.1, enter item pricing. Let's dive in. First, let's get ourselves to option 8.1 from the CoPOS main menu by entering 8.1. For the item selection method, let's choose number 1. Only your responses to the above prompts. Here we specify the restricting vendor, brand, category, and departments. Let's restrict this to UNFI items whose brand is Amy's, and finally to the frozen and refrigerated departments. So we select yes to restrict to only one vendor, and when prompted for the vendor, we enter UNFI. We repeat this for the brand but enter Amy's in response to the brand prompt. We respond no when prompted for the restricting item category, then select all categories. Finally, for the department, we select yes when asked to select specific departments, then select the frozen and refrigerated departments from the department checklist. Next, we are presented with additional prompts about the selected items. Let's walk through these. Include items missing price. We'll select the default, which is no. Include items missing cost. We'll select the default, which is no. Include only items whose margin is less than 0. We'll select the default, which is no. This prompt gives you a way to easily change only items whose cost exceeds their price. Derive item costs from missing SRP and margin. Again, we'll select the default, which is no. Include only items marked as active. We'll select the default, which in this case is yes. We only want to consider active items. Restrict to items with unfrozen SRPs. We'll select the default, which is yes. CoPOS gives you the ability to freeze item prices, something we'll cover in a later video. Item prices, SRPs, which are frozen, cannot be changed. Apply additional date restrictions. We'll select the default, which is no. However, let's see what happens if we were to choose yes. By selecting yes, we can restrict the scope of the selected items to either items added on or after a specific date, or items last sold on or after a specific date. Restrict to certain green fields. We'll select the default, which is no. OK to proceed. We'll select the default, which is yes. Remember, if any of your responses to the above-mentioned prompts is incorrect, you can choose the back selection or simply press the up arrow key to go back to the previous prompt. CoPOS then compiles a list of qualifying items, and you are shown a screen that looks something like this. Notice that you have 2 pages of items for a total of 16 items. Also notice the 12-month achieved margin figure, which in our case is 52.56%. This is an aggregate figure and will change as you edit pricing information. So let's briefly discuss each of the choices you see below. Change cost. Selecting this choice lets you change an item's cost. When you change a cost, the SRP is changed to reflect the item's margin and is rounded based on the rounding method you choose for your store. Change margin. Selecting this choice lets you change an item's margin. When you change an item's margin, the SRP is changed to reflect the item's cost and the margin just entered. As with a cost change, the SRP is rounded based on the rounding method you chose for your store. Change SRP. Selecting this choice lets you change an item's SRP. Changing the SRP changes the margin based on the cost. You can also use a margin that you enter to determine an SRP. Let's do this. Go to line 1 and enter M35 in response to the SRP. CoPOS determines the SRP based on the item's cost, $4.03, and a 35% margin, thus arriving at an SRP of $6.25 when rounded. When in any of these columns, the directional arrow keys work as stated. So the up arrow key takes you up one line in the same column. The down arrow key takes you down one line in the same column. The right arrow key takes you one column to the right on the same line, and the left arrow key takes you one column to the left on the same line. Horizontal and vertical wrapping also occurs. When changing the cost, margin, or SRP, you can use a simple price calculator showing the unit cost, margin, and unit price. Enter P to use it. You can view Help for cost, margin, or SRP by pressing the F10 key. Finally, the bottom two lines show both the original field and the results of any changes. Returning back to the choice line, our next choice is Change All. Selecting this choice brings up a box of 11 additional things you can do. Most of these choices are self-explanatory, but let's quickly cover what happens when we select the first choice, which is increase or decrease SRP of all items by a specified percentage. Let's select this choice. Next, we are prompted for the percentage increase or decrease. For a decrease, enter a negative increase. For example, entering -5 would indicate a 5% decrease. Let's increase the SRP of all items by 5%. Next, we are prompted to ignore all SRPs under $1. Let's select Yes, so we'll leave anything with an SRP under $1 unchanged. Finally, we are prompted to confirm our 5% increase. Let's go ahead and select Yes. We are then notified that we have increased the price of all of these items by 5%. View summary, let's say no. Now we see the new item SRPs. Notice the 12-month achieved margin has also increased from 52.56% to 54.82%. Returning to the More choice, we see a list of 5 more choices. Let's briefly cover each of these choices. Item code / SKU. Selecting this choice lets you toggle the display of the leftmost column between the item code and the SKU. When we select this, we can see the display of the item SKU in the leftmost column. Let's select item SKU and see what happens. Now, let's select column 3, Contents. Upon making the selection, we'll be prompted for a field to display in column 3, which currently reads Brand. Let's change this to Quantity Sold. We'll select Quantity Sold and then be prompted for the time frame. Let's select the last 6 months, and our display is now updated to reflect this choice. Our next choice, which is Margin SRP Float, lets you control which column is fixed, the SRP or the margin. This is important because it determines what changes when we enter an item's cost. We start out with a fixed margin, so when a cost is changed, the SRP is recalculated based on the margin. If we select Float the Margin, Fix the SRP, cost changes will recalculate the margin based on the new cost and the existing SRP. Let's change the float from float the SRP, fix the margin, to float the margin, fix the SRP. Notice that margin float is shown towards the top of the screen underneath the screen's title. Now let's change the cost of the first item from $4.03 to $4.95. Notice that the margin changes from 38.85% to 24.89%, but the SRP remains unchanged at $6.59. This is a handy way to adjust costs without changing SRPs. Returning to our more suite of choices, we come to Save List. This choice allows us to save this set of items as a list for future use by this or another option. And finally, the More choice gives you yet 3 more things to do. These are price deltas. Price deltas show you pricing before and after changes. Deltas for cost, SRP, achieved margin, and gross profit are shown. What if? Selecting this choice gives you what if scenarios based on SRP percentage increases, decreases, or rounding method changes. Let's see what happens when we increase SRPs by 10%. Let's select the top choice, then select the number of days back to consider. We'll go back 90 days. Finally, enter the price change, which in this case is 10%. So let's just enter 10%. We are then prompted to round prices up. Let's select yes. Let's exclude the items that are priced under $1. We can see that this 10% price increases would generate a whopping 96-cent revenue increase for this set of items based on their past 90 days sales. We are then prompted to apply this increase. Let's decline, so we'll select no. The final choice, which is revenue statistics, selecting this choice lets you view before and after changes based on sales of these items for the previous 12 months. Returning to the original choice line, we see sort or find. Selecting this choice lets you change the order in which these items are sorted. You can also search for a particular item based on the contents in a column. We'll cover sorting and finding in a separate video. Let's sort this set of items by SKU in ascending order. First, select Sort, then select SKU. Finally, select Ascending for the sort order. Notice the items are now sorted by SKU in ascending order. Returning back again to the original choice line, we can save the changes made in this session. Let's arrow over to Save and affirm that we wish to save these changes by selecting Yes. We are then prompted to use these items for the last saved set. We'll decline this by selecting No. Let's have these price changes take effect immediately rather than on a future date. We do this by selecting No when prompted. We do, however, wish to save this set of items to a list, so let's respond Yes when prompted to save to a list. Let's only save those items with changed SRPs, so we'll select Yes when prompted to restrict to only those items with changed SRPs. We are then presented with a summary of what was changed. Finally, we are prompted to print shelf tags for this set of items. Let's bypass this for now. Remember, we saved this list of changed SRPs, which can be then used in option 8.24, print multiple shelf tags, at a later time. We are now finished. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe.